Good afternoon, everybody. You are welcome. We're going to start now, and our theme is the art of healing. The people who are going to speak, we're going to go in the order: Sekai, Kgaogelo, Tebogo, and Margaret, and then Fouad. I'm going to give us 20 minutes to speak, and then I'm going to wave my book, and then I'll wave it to her 5 minutes. Is that okay? Okay. So Sekai is first.
So I'm going to give you a bit of context about who I am before I start. So my name is Sekai Makoni. I grew up in the UK, but my family originally from Zimbabwe. And I had more experience in the academic world, so I did a BA in African Studies, and then I went straight into a Master's at LSE in Race, Ethnicity and Post-Colonial Studies, so I was in the more sociological world. And I took a bit of a break from academia, because before I thought I really wanted to do a PhD and be on that journey. And then I was starting to think about what are different ways that you can impart knowledge that aren't necessarily traditional academia. So my stepping back into that world was moving to the Netherlands 2 years ago to go to art school there. So I just graduated from the Sandberg Institute, which is the graduate school of the Retail there. And it was a critical studies program within an art school, so you could take a more creative approach to how you studied whatever your theme wanted to be. I went there initially thinking about Black European women's identities. I have a podcast called Between Ourselves, which is conversations between Black women on different topics. And so when I wrote my thesis, I wanted to think about it being accessible on different levels, so not just how I wrote, that it wasn't very dense academic language, because I think we're often talking about really important issues that I think sometimes people aren't allowed into because of the conventions we're asked to write within academia. So I collaborated with a graphic artist for my thesis itself, and he works for the Black Archives in Amsterdam, so his name's Raoul Belay, and he designed mine into like a zine, so it opens out. Give you a quick demonstration, like into a poster that has like a quote from the thesis, and so in the form of how I created the thesis, I wanted to make it something that would still be alive off the page. And today I'm just going to read through parts of the thesis, and then you can give some reflections at the end. And yeah, I grew up in the UK and I don't speak Shona, so my pronunciation may not be perfect, but bear with me, okay? So I'll start with the intro. This is a quote from Bell Hooks. I came to theory because I was hurting. I came to theory desperate, wanting to comprehend, to grasp what was happening around and within me. I wanted to make the hurt go away. I saw in theory then a location for healing. I feel a connection to Hooks' description of her coming to theory and the healing capacity it contains. I tend to connect to theory written by Black women, as it often combines theory with lived experience, creating a critical praxis. In this vein, I chose to focus on emotion and tears for this paper. My title is Misodzi, a Shona word from Zimbabwe. It means tears, and is one of my great-grandmother's names. In Shona culture, you name your child in relation to the context they are born into. Her name, Misodzi, is thought to be a reference to the many siblings she lost growing up. The name speaks to the sadness my great-great-grandmother must have felt. I would argue that crime isn't something we speak about often enough, especially in relation to Black womanhood. The power of the strong Black woman stereotype means our pain is often seen, not seen, or heard. Through this project, I wanted to shift the ways in which Black women's pain is rendered invisible by centering Black women's experiences and healing approaches to that pain. I began by conceptualizing tears as a form of cathartic release and considered what might happen if we allowed space for tears and thought of them as a sign of possible collective mourning. For me, the entry point to tears was song, Southern African songs to be exact. I had 3 experiences which made me take seriously Southern African singing and its connection to emotion. And so this thesis is split into me talking about my experiences, me interviewing women, and black women theorists, and so I've kind of interwoven that. So these are the initial experiences I open with. I was part of Sisters Uncut, and Sisters Uncut is a direct action feminist group based in the UK, doing work countering cuts to domestic violence services. So as part of Sisters Uncut reclamation of Holloway Prison in June 2017, we reclaimed the visitor centre to draw attention to the swift closure of the prison following the death of a young black woman, Sarah Reed, within its walls. There was a seeming desire to make use of the prime real estate the prison sat on in the highly coveted London borough of Islington. We wanted to draw attention to the fact that the land should be used to honour women and non-binary people and the services they require, especially in relation to domestic violence. As part of the wellbeing team, I helped coordinate events around the theme of healing. Many things happened under this umbrella. We organised sessions on intention setting and collective dreaming. There were workshops on menstrual and lunar cycles, and we had a prayer room for those of faith. One of the most important events for me was the singing workshop put on by singing leader Shilpa Shah. On that day, we sat in a large circle and were taught the harmonies to a Zulu Xhosa song, Tina Simunye, We Are Together. We learned the song by ear. This took a while, but when all the pieces came together, it sounded beautiful. As we settled into the song, I started to feel tearful. I was just about holding it together when we finished the song. I looked at a fellow sister whose eyes were welling up, and my eyes began to spill over. I felt awkward as I was meant to introduce the next workshop, but couldn't really speak. Shilpa took over and affirmed that we didn't need to speak, we could just be and feel, and reminded us that these songs were powerful and had emotional impact. The second instance happened in March 2018 at the University of Oxford. I was working as a facilitator for an organisation brought in to assist delegates of a global equity programme. Of all places, it was held at Rhodes House, which is a contentious venue to say the least. The programme included a South African cohort for whom Cecil Rhodes is a deeply disturbing figure of their colonial and recent history. Considering the problematic context, those in charge seemed unwilling to engage with the discomfort and pain the space held. One of the most poignant moments was when the South African delegates took over and sang the famous anti-apartheid song, Azania. For me, it was highly symbolic that this occurred in the Great Hall of Rhodes House. Azania was an early name proposed for post-liberation South Africa that alludes to the land that black South Africans demanded as post-colonial restitution. When they sang the song, it literally shifted the energy in the room. It felt rousing, powerful, and liberating. Those singing were unapologetically themselves in a space that called for Eurocentric ideas of decorum and quiet, subdued behaviour. I found myself overcome and overwhelmed. I felt angry, melancholic, and proud of those at the front. I also felt a deep sense of connection and relief that they had chosen to engage head-on with the issue of Rhodes rather than avoid it, as the organisers had opted to. Again, South African group singing had prompted something in me that I had not intended to come out in public, something seemingly close to the surface for me, yet untapped. In the summer of August 2018, I attended KIN's first annual convening of Black British activists from across the UK. We held a variety of workshops for each other across the long weekend. There were sessions on theatre of the oppressed, the dangers of skin bleaching, Afrocentric foodways, poetry classes and lectures on themes such as drug policy and the overpolicing of black bodies. I attended a session towards the end of the weekend on singing and massage. Amina Gichinga, the director of Black Women and Femmes Choir Nawi Collective, led the session. She selected the Zulu Xhosa song made prominent during South Africa's political struggle, Senzani Na, What Have We Done? Notably, there were no men who chose to participate in the workshop. It ended up being all black women. We stood in a circle, did warm-up exercises, and Amina taught us our parts. Once we had been singing for a while and repeated the song a few times, again, tears began to bubble up for me. My voice broke and I could no longer sing. As I started to cry, so did others. Those beside me put their arms around me. We made the circle smaller and hugged each other. I felt supported by the group, and it felt like emotion and tears were allowed and welcome. So what do encounters like these mean? How do I write about these private black moments in this text, a platform of sorts? At the time of writing, I'm academically situated within a predominantly white institution, one that is marked by hegemonic conventions of white culture and ideological power, part of a critical studies postgraduate program that is informed by a foundation of Eurocentric masculinist thought. How do I use an Afrocentric feminist epistemology, Collins, when under white gaze? And how do I maintain a focus on my ultimate audience, black women, whilst dealing with the restriction of explaining myself through a language and structure that is not of or for me? Additionally, how do I write about Africa with an awareness of the ways in which those of the diaspora have an outsider perspective and perhaps a romanticised notion of Southern Africa and song? As a black woman of mixed heritage who was grown up in the UK, raised by black Zimbabwean women who were the daughters of political exiles from what was then Southern Rhodesia, my family holds a particular history and perspective on Southern Africa. How do I write in a way that remains aware of all of this? So then I went into some sections talking about more academic perspectives on how I talk through those notions. But I kind of really want to focus on my respondents, so the people I interviewed. They all varied in age from late 20s to late 30s. So Amina is Kenyan and Chinese and is an organizer. Ari is Liberian and British. She's a trained clinical psychologist. Naomi's Nigerian British. Chandra is African American. Zara is Barbadian and St. Lucian. So it's a real mix of different historic backgrounds of people I spoke to. And so a central theme that appeared in multiple responses was that singing provided access to emotions we might try to keep under the surface to get through everyday life. Singing itself seemed to give space to the release of emotions such as sadness, and Ari said that singing can move you. It can allow you to relax or to be open to emotion. It allows whatever's inside you to rise up. So I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. For Ari, there seemed to be real impact to not having to talk about what was behind her emotional expression. This chimed with my own feeling and relief that Shilpa's intervention in the singing workshop when she reassured us that it was all right for the songs to trigger emotion and to not have to speak. Often there seems to be a need to make tears more acceptable, bearable, less shameful. And this often means that people suppress their tears in public and try to make them go away. But what would it mean to allow ourselves to stay with difficult emotions and fully feel them, even when with other people? Naomi spoke about the vulnerability that singing provided her with. Singing allows you to let yourself feel things that you wouldn't usually feel. This made me think of the ways that black women may often be holding emotions beneath the surface, that there isn't time or space to engage with them. In a similar vein, Darlene Clark-Hine writes about the ways in which black women can give the appearance of being open, while fully obscuring the operations of their inner lives from public view. She calls this a culture of dissemblance that many adopt in order to survive. And I'm going to jump ahead to, the artist and academic George Mahashe came to Amsterdam whilst I was writing, and so I attended a dinner that he was at, so I was able to kind of pick his brain a little bit. And so he gave me some interesting perspectives as well. On a trip to Amsterdam, Mahashe gave a talk where he explored some of his work. When asked about his thoughts on Southern African singing, Mahashe suggested that Southern African songs have been used consciously and unconsciously as weapons of war, be it to empower protesters on marches or in training camps of guerrilla fighters in liberation struggles. Accordingly, certain types of songs helped energize groups and summon powers to continue to fight. One could read the singing as a way of becoming part of the larger group self. Mahashe suggested that we could conceptualize more mournful Southern African songs as tools to hold trauma at bay, singing acting as a barrier to withstand the dehumanizing impact of colonialism, historically and in the present. Thus, we sing to preserve our humanity. When we transpose this idea to a music classroom in the UK, these same songs can hold emotional and transformational strength. So, there's a little bit before this where Amina, who runs the Nabi Collective, she also teaches singing in schools, and she says, she said, basically, she's not embarrassed about crying anymore, especially in front of students. So she says, I don't find it embarrassing anymore. I'm trying to get rid of the shame of showing my emotion, because it's real. I've cried in front of school children while singing these songs before. I think that it's important that it is public sometimes, because otherwise people think that they're weird when they're moved by music. So in Zimbabwe, there are Nyangas who heal through traditional herbs, but there are others for whom healing is dependent on finding the right song. It is powerful to think of songs as having healing capacity, and that the right song is the main ingredient for a person's access to healing. As a conceptual device, thinking of Southern African songs as having potency means we can consider them to hold power, to help us work towards personal and collective healing. I wonder if having an appreciation of the sacredness of songs might impact how we engage with them. Accordingly, perhaps it isn't just the song, but those who are singing that holds the power. Amina jokingly asserted, would I feel that way if white people were singing them? Something I found particularly curious were responses to my question regarding the presence of black people when respondents cried, and whether black people being there impacted the perceived safety of the space for them. I wondered if being in space with other black bodies impacts the ability to access emotion that may subconsciously be deemed unsafe to show as freely when white people are present. In relation to this, Naomi articulated a point in reverse of what I'd anticipated. She says, I think I've been a bit more at home being vulnerable with white people, maybe because I've spent so long not being in safe spaces, but I've developed an ability to be comfortable in spaces that I'm innately uncomfortable in, whereas spaces that hold majority black people are actually spaces that I've not grown up in. So I've really had to challenge myself this year, where I felt not quite at home or that I didn't belong. Naomi's use of innately uncomfortable speaks to the ways that black women may have to conjure safety for themselves, even in spaces that aren't safe. How do we provide an internal space of safety to resist that which lies outside us? This ability to transform one's experience, or at least attempt to, I find important but saddening. Additionally, the desire to turn that experience around by consciously putting oneself in spaces with more black people is labour that others may not see or even have to consider. And so the last example I'm going to give. The last time Knox cried was when she was in labour. Those around her happened to be black, and this element seemed to bring up a conundrum over causality. Was the space safe because there were only black people present? Or was it her relationship to those individuals that made it safe, and their blackness was secondary? Knox stated, I think for me it's not always necessarily whether they're black or not that makes it safe, it's my relationship with them. But then again, the people who I do feel safe with tend to be black. In this chicken and egg scenario, it was difficult to disentangle the two issues. They linked to the saying, all skin folk ain't your kinfolk. For many black people, mistreatment is not a surprise when it comes from white people. We have many examples from history and the present. It can be more hurtful when that pain or experience of non-connection happens with black people. Knox's hesitancy over whether safety and blackness are mutually exclusive, and Naomi's work to consciously engage in more black spaces speaks to these notions. I have like a few more bits now, we're done. So when writing this paper, I fought an internal battle over whether to include research that pointed to the scientific evidence that proved the positive impact that singing and music have on our bodies, be it that people's heartbeats sync up when they sing together, that patients who go under anaesthetic when listening to music have better recovery rates, or that tears release toxins from our bodies and cleanse us. I didn't want to have to refer to traditional empirical science to reinforce my argument, because science is so imbued with Eurocentric notions of masculinity. I didn't want to have to validate myself through that line of argument. As Kessie suggests, the importance of science as the dominant and most legitimate form of knowledge in contemporary society and its relationship to whiteness and masculinity cannot be overestimated. And yeah, I was going to read my conclusion when I'm done. So in conclusion, I found the resonance between people's responses and black women's theories both healing and affirming. I strongly connected to Amina's notion of the convergence that happens when singing and crying together. It's painful, but it's beautiful to hold another up in that moment. She spoke of pain and beauty happening simultaneously, an almost bittersweet experience. And this duality relates to my feelings towards theory and its history of eliciting pain in the ways it has been instrumentalised against black people. And I drew from Hooks's notion of the link between theory and practice in my work. She says, when our lived experience of theorising is fundamentally linked to processes of self-recovery, of collective liberation, no gap exists between theory and practice. Theory is not inherently healing, liberatory or revolutionary. It fulfills this function only when we ask that it do so and direct our theorising towards this end. And so I have directed my theorising towards that end. This also links to Afewape's notions of creativity as a force of resistance and healing. Afewape argues that people are inherently creative and always resist experiences of subjugation, prejudice and harm, even if those forms of resistance are invisible to others. And so that's my thesis. And I have a whole load of copies as well, so I'm not sure how much to charge from it. I was going to say like 50, but I also want to get rid of them, so I'm going to just give you one if you ask. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Kgaogelo Mashilo. But I have a small equation for what I actually call myself, which is Ka, right? So the government name, obviously, Kgaogelo, it means to be merciful. So I'll ask my mother, what does this mean? And she says it's a semi-biblical name, so it sort of means okay, so we would say Mudimar Kgaogelo, which means may God have mercy on us, right? And I'm like, damn, am I such a bad child that you need? But yeah, so there's also the saying which means, or which directly translates into ugly name is a curse, right? But it also means that your name kind of follows you when you become a name, and it's kind of like your curse, right? So I've never associated my being merciful or sympatheticness or my timidness with being female, but rather as the curse of my name. So I think I was 16 when I decided I don't like the nicknames that people are giving me. I was getting KK from Kgaogelo, I was getting KG, I didn't like the weight association with my name. I was getting Gelo, you know, so my mom would say cow, which ended up being cow, just in fast speaking, I suppose. So I picked up that she was calling me cow, and I thought, how if I'm going to give myself a pet name, I'm going to be cow. Yeah, so my research is kind of based around researching the different connotations that come with the word cow, especially because it's spelled in English and not in Homo, for example. So yeah, cow. So I started identifying with this name, and I really started finding like comfort in even introducing myself. I mean, I would hear different pronunciations of my name because there are different variations of it. So my dad being steady speaking would say Kgaogelo, my mom would say Kgaogelo. So I was always like, I don't actually know how I should say, you should say my name either, because I've gotten both sides of it. So it was comfortable for me to say cow because I'm saying it right. So yeah. Started identifying with the name. I get a little bit obsessive and I start doing things that kind of connect myself within this name. So I got the bull ring, I stretched my ear, became vegetarian, and these kind of things was small, but they like were accumulating, I suppose. So fast forward to trying to figure out what to write about for my research. I decided to do the cow thing, right? More about myself. And I realized the reactions when I introduced myself as cow, why people would be like, "Are you sure? Am I not going to offend you?" To black people, they automatically go into the vernacular variations of it, which was cool. So the English dictionary obviously would have the association of a cow being an unpleasant or a disliked woman, right? And yeah, I think we all know to call a woman a cow, for example, yeah. So I understood the discomfort that then came with that. But I want the world to know me as cow, and I thought I was happy to accept just the happy associations of the cow. So the sacred cow, for example, where in Hindu cultures, you know, I want to be the sacred cow. So that's where I started collecting and sort of being biased to the negative associations and just finding all the positivity that comes with it. For the sake of the theme of this session, this was my way of healing, finding the positive and making associations with the cow. I think, in a way, I am navigating myself as a suburban girl was kind of removed away from culture, but culturally as well, navigating myself within my feminism, within my culture, and trying to find it out, but also relating it to the cow. So it seems easier using the cow instead of just the woman, where I found it I've grown up finding it uncomfortable to be a female, to be black, and so on. So in the Bantu-speaking cultures, we have the god of the wet nose, which is obviously putting the cow in the level of being a sacred cow. I find with all the cultural associations of the cow, there are positives and there are negatives, right? So where there are positives within ritual, within hiring the cow in African cultures, there's also a song that always bugged me, which was Mosadi wa rekwa kadikhomo, right? Which means that a woman is born with cows. And I was just like, so I've always been then trying to heal or to find ways of how to approach these things, right? And it's like, lobola, for example, is something that burdens me as a female, trying to figure out, do I want it, do I not want it? It's a cultural thing. Is it something that I want to associate with myself? Am I this cow, right? I'm going to share my works. In my research, I kind of go through other people's work, to name two, and how they, or what cow associations I find within their work and the female, right? So I'm going to go through my work and try and explain then where or how I make the links between myself and the cow. So Adeli is something that was just, I don't know where it came from. I just started saying Adeli, right? I think it's also the kind of taking away the sexualizing of the female body for some reason, using a sexual object of an animal, the udder, but it would be easier to see an udder on a female, right? It would kind of distract you from seeing all the other sexual parts because you're thinking, why does this woman have an udder? I hope. So I made Adeli meditation. Also as a religious navigation as well. So I grew up with Zion Christian parents, and there's always things within the church as well that are kind of like, why are my brothers doing different things to what I'm doing that I don't understand, that I'm trying to also understand, or trying to understand if I should leave it behind or take it with, you know. I think that with our cultures now, what's happening with this globalized kind of technology world where we are able to see so many different other cultures, we're allowed to not choose and be disrespectful and kind of culture vulture, but I think we're allowed to see what it is of our cultures that we want and what it is of different parts of the world that we want to adapt and be part of as well. So I started drawing on vinyl, or fake leather, I suppose you could say. And reason for that is because I've never been, my parents being Zion Christian, I've never been through cultural things where I've had to wear skin or have to slaughter anything, so I felt like it wouldn't be, I want to say correct, it wouldn't be right of me to use a real animal cowhide when I've never been sort of, yeah, with that. So I started drawing lines and just, doodling basically on vinyl. So this artwork's called My Nose Runs in the Family. Also trying to find my place within the family, I suppose. And it started with portraiture and combining it with like cow spouts and trying to figure that out that way. This one's called Mashilo, which means the crazy one of the Mashilo family. because of my adornments and things that, I mean, they say that my adornments and things are not of my culture now, so it's just trying to make my parents understand sort of where I'm coming from as well, and trying to meet them halfway as well. So yeah, I did like portraitures of how they see me, and it must look crazy, right? So yeah. And then there's Mofasi, which for me was, so all these works kind of happen after a situation, and then the situation will kind of happen in my head, and I'll just draw stuff, and then I'll figure that I think that this means this, right? So again, with the others on the female, trying to take away from the sexuality, but now enhancing the sexuality with wool that I've woven over the breast area. Sitting down, because I always feel like the women in the family are always in a seated position, or like in an inferior position, and you know, the man must always be held on a pedestal kind of thing. So Mofasi happened also because of the church. The women stood on the floor while the men get to sit on chairs, and it was just like, but why? Then I made wife material. Wife material was inspired by how you get these fancy houses now with cow hides on the ground, and sort of this idea of death acting as a decorative thing within the home. And for me, I associated that with the idea of the female being an ornament within the house. Kind of, we were brought up to do certain things that would please the household, and you kind of just grow up thinking, you know, I'm here to look after the household, so I'm just this object that's kind of like a vacuum machine or like a carpet. So we push things under the rug, or you know, like yeah, just this is what I associated with that. These are in no particular order. I'm just like freestyling. But yeah. So then drowning cow I made also as a body discomfort. But I remember in primary school when we started wearing the black costume that we go swimming in, the kind of uniform costume, and how uncomfortable I felt showing so many parts of myself, even if they weren't working yet or whatever you might want to call it. But yeah, so, and then I also remember my dad telling me about our family lineage and how they would walk with cows through rivers and stuff like that, and I was just like, but cows don't swim, right? So I made drowning cow. I made drowning cow out of wool. It's wool, and it's actually quite like a heavy costume, and the goggles are made from concrete, and they're blinded so you can't see when you swim. So this costume was made to fail. So I always thought, even being a black woman, I've always felt like I was set for failure, like within this world. Like even the contradicting lessons that my dad would teach me, I always felt like you're setting me up to drown or to fail. So I made this costume sort of reflection on that. So it's just a close-up of it. Sorry, these images, some of them are really bad, but I hope you can see. Mafofora, this is a really bad picture, but Mafofora was another reaction to what my dad said. My dad would ask me about my earrings and stuff, and he'd be like, do you take them off when you sleep? And I was like, no, not really, don't really see why, sometimes, maybe. And he said, my ancestors won't recognize me when I'm sleeping. And to me, I was like, wait, what? Don't they recognize the spirit and not the flesh? But, so this was me drawing me, the wool being what my parents sort of see, some of the darker parts that you can't see, like the earring, being what my parents kind of see, and the white lines representing the spirit, and my ancestors, or these forms that are behind me, these kind of spirits recognizing me because, you know, we kind of look the same outside of our bodies. Then there's Fita, again, with the others trying to hide the sexual body form, but it's also still there, right? And the face as well. This kind of comes from the shame or the body shaming that you kind of go through growing up, and yeah, we were always, or I was always taught at a certain age. I mean, from when you were younger, you play with mini skirts on, you know, and then there's a certain age where you're kind of told, no man, start hiding this part, start hiding this part. So the discomfort with hiding parts of myself at a certain age, I think is what kind of summed up in this artwork. And then I started making costumes as well. These costumes for me sort of are armors as well, whereas I sort of feel like as females within my family, there's no protection against all these rules that are kind of made to weigh us down. So I make soft costumes that really aren't armor at all, but I call them armors. Yeah. So also an experience I had was on a trip with a few guys who took a pit stop to pee on the side of the road, and they were emphasizing how I might have penis envy because I couldn't do the same type of thing. So I struggled with that. It's just like why I have so much that I could also be proud of, and I made other envy to take away from the section. I don't know if you guys can see the people in there. Yeah? Okay. So, I mean, very sexual kind of posing, which makes me think of how I was envious of that kind of woman, like a woman who was very in tune with her sexuality and body, things that I couldn't kind of grow up with. So I made these figures for thinking of that. And then, no. Okay. And then I made Kgaogelo, spelled C-O-W instead of K-H-A-U. Yeah. So Kgaogelo is to make haste, right, or to hurry up, like the song. So yeah, I made it on a milk stool again for the car reference and taking the something by its horns because I don't want to think that it's just bulls that have horns. But yeah, so sort of a fearless woman who is making haste of changes and healing faster throughout these cultural sort of barriers that keep you at bay. And yeah, so I think I'll stop there. Yeah, no, so it's the last artwork, so you're not missing out. But yeah, it's just I find humor in finding connections with the cow, and I think that the humor that comes with that is sort of my way of healing, besides making the art, which is quite meditative because of the repetition of my lines and the wool turning and stuff like that. So yeah, this is my form of healing. Yeah.
We call on the energies of all women who have gone before us, those who have traveled this road. We call all those energies of those women that have been where we are today, and ask the spirit of those women, the feminine energy, to come and be with us, to guide us, to protect us, and to help us to understand what new ways we should be able to come with, to come out of the spaces that we keep on finding ourselves in. Yeah.
afternoon, everyone. The title of our paper is Feminism and Sankofa Theory, a case study addressing inequality in a patriarchal world. So before I get into the paper, I just want to say that we aim to achieve we had two agendas when we decided to write this paper. First, the academic agenda. I and Tebogo, who is my co-writer, wanted to use this piece as a case study to take an existing project and that utilizes women-centered and African-centered theories and philosophies that serve as a foundation to develop spaces of healing for African women that are sensitive to their lived experiences in a patriarchal world. And on a personal level, we decided to use this presentation as a record or a catalogue for a personal journey of healing and discovery that revealed the textured and layered and complex dimensions of pain or trauma and how they can be digested, broken down, and healed using non-conventional psychological tools. So now I'll go into the body of our work. In the context of South Africa, and in the context of South Africa as a patriarchal society, women and more especially African women live in external structures and systems that are not of their own creation. The roles that they play in these systems are multiple. The ways in which African women choose to define themselves and the way in which the world or society chooses to define them often differ and are in conflict with each other. In addition to this, these roles or definitions that society gives women are often disempowering and paint them in a weakened light. So these roles often pit traditional masculine roles or characteristics against feminine roles or characteristics and weaken or devalue women and make them simplistic or a sort of invisible sort of entity in society. This is dangerous because it dehumanizes and silences the full spectrum of the woman, and more importantly, those who do not fit or conform to these assigned roles and choose to define themselves outside these assigned roles are usually demonized, punished, viewed with suspicion or contempt. As we navigate society as women and African women, we fit into binary roles that are assigned from the external society. We can put them in two columns, the good column and the bad column. The good column could be the obedient wife or the dutiful daughter, the conscious woke sister, or the agreeable woman. In the bad column, we can put the bossy, aggressive, overeducated, childless career woman that emasculates women everywhere she goes. Or we can put the ditzy slay queen, or the angry black woman. And lastly, and most importantly, my favorite one is the strong black woman who can endure pain and suffering because she can take it because she's made for it, which is a complete fallacy. The dangers of these roles is that we are seen as a lesser form in compared to men. If you can look at feminine traits in society, they're often pitted next to masculine traits, and because they're pitted against them, it's all a sort of comparison, looking at masculine traits as the stronger and female traits as the weaker. For example, empathy is seen as weak versus anger, which is seen as a powerful thing. Collaboration is seen as weak versus competition. intuition and creation is often compared or measured against logic and science to its detriment. So what we decided to achieve, what we aim to achieve in this, by using this case study, is to explore the premise that the ability to navigate a patriarchal world, addressing certain inequalities, lies in the strengthening of defining and grounding oneself within one's femininity. The work of Ebukosini Solutions is used to demonstrate the efficacy of this premise within the context of a non-Western grassroots solutions to heal mental and physical trauma. The rest of the paper will be completed by Tebogo.
The image of the goddesses inspired women to see ourselves as divine, our bodies as sacred, the changing phases of our lives as holy, our aggression as healthy, our anger as purifying, and our power to nurture and create, but also to limit and destroy when necessary, as the very force that sustains all life. Through the goddesses, we can discover our strength, enlighten our mind, own our bodies, and celebrate our emotions. We can move beyond narrow constrict roles and become whole. This is from Star Hawk, showing this reflection. In every situation, when pain and trauma has taken place, healing is needed to assist those who have been affected to move forward. In a patriarchal society that has been constructed socially, politically, economically, and spiritually to oppress women, it is important that women stand up and claim their power of being human. This presentation is informed by the work that Ebukosini Solutions is doing. Ebukosini is a community-based organization that focuses on African-centered education. It has different programs that is coordinating, and one of the programs is its own woman called Kandaka. Kandaka means a queen or strong female ruler who ruled in ancient Kush, what we know today as East Africa. She reigns from about 40 BC to 10 BC. These are women that have fought for justice and equality. And for me, every time when engaging with this kind of work, of the challenges that we are faced with, I always summon the spirit of these women to remember that we are not the first one to find ourselves here. And they find themselves in situations that were difficult, and they never stop fighting. And because they never stop fighting, and they won, even if sometimes we don't remember the fight that they fought and the victories that they have accomplished. I always call on that because I believe whatever spirit that was guiding them, it can still guide us today. And we will win again if we still remember that we are not the first one to be here, and we can still do and come up with solutions for whatever that we are challenged with. So Kandaka for me is there. And recently when there was this war in Sudan, for those who are remembering, when the professional women led the protest in Sudan, they even look at them and say, the Kandake spirit is back again to come and create solutions for our people. So, so this is the stories that they energized me. I look up to them. Within Ebukosini, these stories of women helps with reweaving the self back to power. Within Ebukosini, Kandaka is a platform for women to revisit themselves, dialogue with each other about individual experience and find solutions that suit them. The healing that takes place through we do, it takes place through focusing on the womb. And I always get the question, why the womb? Because it is what we are having as women, and that is where our power sits. According to Queen Afua, on Sacred Woman, and people like Prakasha, on womb wisdom, awakening the creative and forgotten power of the feminine, and Page on the healing power of the sacred woman. They attest that the womb is the seat of the woman power and stores the experiences and traumas of women. Patriarchy's mission has always meant to destroy women's power and systematically created social constructs that targeted women's wombs, to constrict women's intuition, creativity, sexuality, and her divine power. When a woman is in tune with herself, she cannot be controlled or led. She is the leader of herself and she will herself to her destiny. Tampering with the energies of the womb causes insecurity, confusion, fear, and ignorance of the self. Therefore, to come back to the self is to reconnect with the part that has always been a target, which is the womb. Our interest has always been to share our interest has always been to share the patriarchal system underpinning with women that are not in the activism or higher learning. Those women that we engage with them every day. Our elders, working class, the women that are out there, that most of the time they are not the ones that can even say some of the terms that we are saying, but they know something. And for me, my concern is like, how do we reach them? Because when also we are in our own world of being able to deconstruct and put all this definition, we forget that there are all other women that we might leave them behind. And now, for me, it's how do we engage with those other women in our society? Those who experience patriarchy, but they have a different way to articulate it. Most of these women, they have their own way to define patriarchy, and one even claim to be feminist, but they are aware of the unjust of the system. In one of the sessions that we have of Kandaka, there was one lady who was sharing her story, and for me it was an interesting story because she was sharing the story of her grandmother, who changed their baby. But then the grandmother changed their husband's surname to an African surname during those times of apartheid, when she realized that when they don't change their surname to be at least Africans, maybe they can go into the category of color, they will miss an opportunity. And I was interested in the story of this woman. I was interested on the story of this old woman. For me, what was interesting is how she saw the system, how it's constructed, and come up with a solution. And how she managed to convince her husband and the whole family to change their surname. That today they are still using that surname. But it's all those kind of powerful experiences of women that are there, and they always have a way of coming up with solutions. So how Kandaka is taking place? Through creating a therapeutic space where as women we sit and tell our stories, frustration, pains, and other experiences. But to focus, there is a particular topic that we select so that we can be able to focus on what we want to deal with. Like the last session, we were looking at the issues of discussing shame and guilt. How we live with this feeling that we carry on from our parents. I think that's what the other speaker was talking about, the death pain in our body and how they affect us. Also locating that in our bodies where these energies get stored. According to Arewa in her book Opening to Spirit, feelings of shame and guilt closes certain aspects of our spirituality, part of us spiritually, weakening our sense of courage and direction, which contain in the womb, which affect our sense of grounding as women in our femininity. Therefore, through this reflection, we then heal our wounds by connecting the root cause of our behaviors and reweave ourselves back to existence. This session also opens up the understanding of the social construct that as women, we need to interrogate all the time. We need to interrogate all the time. We need to interrogate. I'm not sure what I wanted to say there, but I know that we need to interrogate the systems that we tend to be part of and how it influences ourselves. Question this social construct is very important. We believe telling and listening to other women's stories create the necessary healing for reconnection with their own feminine power in this patriarchal world. Normally what happens is that when we have this session, when someone has shared their own story that needed to be told, we energize that person by saying, we hear you, we see you. Because most of the time we walk through life as women feeling like we are not being heard and we have something to say and we are not being seen. So thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you for having the patience and the stamina to stay here so long and even listen to my talk. So, and also thank you for the whole panel. This was super inspiring, and I'm feeling like, okay, I actually can go home because they said everything. I can learn from that, so I don't need to anymore say what's my problem because they have more. They actually presented the answers. They quoted what I was about to quote. So let me tell you a short story. No, I'm serious. So. Because like the storytelling, what you were raising, so how is storytelling healing? And for me it's like, that is the question which came up as a real research question after we went through a whole detour thinking we would do research. So let me go from the beginning. So I'm from Germany, my dad is Palestinian, I grew up in Germany. And now having an Arabic name is like, people see me as Arabic, although I don't really look Arabic, but then I speak German, right? So I was kind of aware of being other, and I had no access to the theories or to the practices of this. And so basically, I spoke Arabic, and we spoke other languages. My family was very multilingual, and for me there was always this kind of feeling it's not the proper thing to do. Right? So when you are then at school, you speak German. And you have to actually show that you know German because you have a strange name, right? and then better you speak better German than the others because, I mean, it's whatever they write about what we know. So I didn't really theorize around that, and I just felt like, how do I actually deal with this thing that I actually wanted to get away from this Arabic wrong German my father spoke. So it was a faulty German. And you know, German has all these articles and everything has to be really correct and it's all concord throughout. And you know, like people who are German go crazy. And so my dad just didn't really care, right? He just did whatever he wanted. And you know, the split prefix, like when you have, you call someone up, that doesn't exist in Arabic, so he just always drops the preposition which is there, and so I just felt like really ashamed, right? So you have a dad who speaks wrong German. So this is what I grew up with, and I became an editor who tried to write and speak perfect German, right? And so somehow I found myself as an editor in South Africa, and that's another long story. Just to cut it short, in a way I realized, no, but there are other people who speak more languages. So this language thing is not a thing which is a border which runs through your body, like, you know, West Germany, East Germany, North Korea, South Korea. It's just like there's some language of you, there's some language of you. And so I always wondered, how do other people relate to that when you speak several languages? So now I'm in English, that's the third alleged. So I started thinking, so how does it actually work? And what happened is, at the university, still and currently known as Rhodes, we were at the Postgraduate Writing Center and started a writing group with writing facilitators in academic contexts, how to actually facilitate writing groups. Writing groups are spaces of empowerment for postgraduate students where we basically read each other's texts, mostly chapters, theses, drafts. So the first year we basically looked at our work as writing group facilitators, and in the second year we were like, okay, what are we going to do now in the second year? Because the first one we published a paper, very nicely written, And so I said, like, well, guys, you all basically are multilingual. One was Yoruba English, there was someone from Zimbabwe speaking Shona English, myself, there was a Isikosa speaker from Eastern Cape. So it was like really, I think there were only two who spoke predominantly English. So we started thinking and thinking, then we came up with this question, right? So if we have students who are multilingual, how can we use multilingual realities and practices to empower student voices, enable epistemological access and facilitate more in-depth academic literacy? So that's a mouthful, right? And I was like, okay, let's try this. And we go ahead and I say, okay, let's go back to Pricer work. Brigitte Busch did this work with students in the Western Cape, writing language biographies. So how can you, through writing language biographies, tap into your emotions, into your feelings, and into basically how you got to your language or what your languages are, right? So here's a quote from this paper, which was published in 2006. Our experiences draw on studies of multilingualism and linguistic diversity, which are based on working with life course narratives and on biographic approaches employed in adult education and teacher training courses that raise participants' awareness of their own resources and potential. So that looked also very promising, and we were like, okay, let's do this. We now write our language biographies, right? Because we were saying, if we can write through our own biography and how we use languages, we might at least feel better about it, or have less kind of problems with working in different languages. And one of the guiding theme in our work was actually to say what bell hooks, as Sekai had already referenced, said, I came to theory because I was hurting. The pain within me was so intense that I could not go on living. I came to theory desperate, wanting to comprehend, to grasp what was happening around and within me. Most importantly, I wanted to make the hurt go away. I saw in theory then a location for healing. So now, let me just go back again. So because if we go to this question, I was like, but do we really ask about healing? Do we really ask about ourselves as people and how we got to language? And when we set this program, what actually happened is we wrote like essays for school again. So we wrote, when did we learn English, right? So when did we learn English? When did we speak English? When did we start writing English essays? And so we wrote it also in a very kind of academic style. There's nothing wrong about that, and I think it's great if you have mastery of the English language to communicate to others, right? What our question was, however, is how do we relate to our other languages? How do we activate them, or are they silent? So then I started saying like, okay, now, how can we actually look at our research as a story itself? Or can we look at research as a story which is a narrative which is searching for more than one thing only, for something where we think at one point we have these kind of words, right? Enable epistemological access, but access for who? Right? Is it our access for something, or other people's access for what we say? Or is it actually that we want to epistemologically access our first languages? And also, like, how do we empower ourselves? If we use our broken language, that is what I learned later when I go to Germany and I speak not perfect German. I have a great community and I share the not perfect German with. I'm very empowered. I actually buy now books by migrant German writers. Like you have more and more authors in Germany writing in these varieties, and it's really fun to read. I really enjoy it. And so, how is this empowering that I actually enjoy my wrong German, and even now my wrong English? And so how can I actually, when I speak about in-depth academic literacy, how can I use that as a way to an in-depth academic literacy, right? And so, in a way, what happened is our research project kind of led us in a struggle, and we were actually at the beginning where we said, like, basically we had to look at ourselves, right? How do we actually learn something more about what we are actually looking at? And we are back at that, also what appeared in the other presentations, that we are framed by science which sets up borders around identities, around places, around people, which we don't choose. So I'm not born saying I'm monolingual, right? So children are born, they speak several languages, or they speak one or two. So these kind of constructs, where you have languages countable as borders which transverse bodies, these are fictions. So these are not realities. We actually, as human beings, as living, breathing organisms, are actually, they are not in our bodies, right? So why do I have to now say, oh no, am I bilingual or dual, or am I a diglossic speaker, right? So how does this framework actually not fit to my research interest? That was basically our realization then in the end. And I don't want to go into more detail. We have found a number of resources who go into language ideologies or ideologies about multilingualism, and also other theorists who really speak to that point. So we are not the first asking this question. I just want to illustrate this in a way by the textured narrative, if I may say so, of one of our writing facilitators. So I love this quote, and I would love to write a thesis on it because it's really deep, I think. And so this is the one of our colleagues who is from Zimbabwe, multilingual speaker and scholar at Rhodes, and I want to read it in full length. So it starts, as I was growing up, I had to learn to adjust to both languages, depending on the situation I would be in. I am proud of my understanding of English and my ability to use the language in an academic environment. However, I cannot run away from the fact that English being the only language of learning being used, it affects my confidence, especially if I have to contribute in English. I always become hesitant to speak, because I first think in my mother tongue and then try to translate to English. Spend several minutes thinking and reflecting if it makes sense to me. I developed that fear of not knowing what people would think about my grammar and pronunciation of certain words. At the same time, what could have been the straight-to-the-point narration becomes a long and winding story, as I would be trying to bring some important points to the table. This, however, tends to confuse some people who are not patient enough to grasp everything, thereby causing me to react to this by silencing myself in certain discussions where I feel I would be judged. My strength in using English as a language became writing, as I believed I was good in writing scenes and even academic writing. Being at an academic institution for many years changed my thinking about the use of English as a learning and communicating language only through writing. Being involved in an academic environment where I have to teach, give talks, and be involved in research completely changed my life. I cannot say that I perfectly fit, but the fact that I have swallowed the fear of speaking English has drastically boosted my confidence in many ways. I can speak English without the fear of being judged, and I believe I can even give tangible contributions during discussions. So, in a way, we kind of reviewed our strategy and we said, like, actually there's something else we have to look at and say, how actually can we use language or our languages to expose those ideologies, right? Which are inherent in concepts such as monolingualism, multilingualism, and so on. And how do they draw borders through our speaking bodies? And how can we actually instead think up terms of healing? So basically I am more or less asking questions now. What else could we ask? For instance, how can memory work, language boundary writing, and self-translation heal broken language and empower students' voices? And then maybe also enable epistemological access and facilitate more in-depth academic literacy, right? But we could also just like leave out the in-depth academic literacy, because inherently, if we really do that, it will be actually academic literate, because it deals with ourselves, with our bodies and our realities. And maybe it is also not so much about epistemological access, because who has better epistemological access about our own bodies and our speaking bodies than ourselves? And so let's also ask about empowerment. If we do it, we empower ourselves. So maybe it is a bit of a tautological way to end the conference, but we could also ask, how can memory heal broken languages? And I think that's from me for today. Thank you.
Questions, if there are any questions that anybody has? Did I say something wrong? Oh. Okay, so we'll go. Yes, I see you, yes. Anybody else? Yeah, okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Whichever form, it doesn't matter. You can speak.
Okay, can I start? Thanks so much. Very interesting presentations. Great that you kept us captivated and wanted to really, I personally wanted to hear more. So the show Stewart. Conflict. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, because I know I get traumatized after, all right, I'm worried. Okay, let me try this again. Okay, so, Kgaogelo? Cow. I'm trying to avoid the word cow. I'm just like, really? This patriarchal society, even attaching, names according to, the binaries, animals actually, they're also binaries among its animals. I'm actually like, thanks for those particular revelations, because normally we just take it for granted that that's a cow. And when people say, that's a bull, they have like a bull. Sometimes we don't tend to, really digest what exactly it really means. Thank you so much, Denise, for sharing. I'm just wondering, just for curiosity purposes, is there any, in terms of those binaries, is there any name that is attached, that is the opposite of yours? Does that make sense? Like, cow is actually attached to, the weaker female, gender, am I right? Sex. And so I'm just wondering what in your language then perhaps could be the bull, the so-called bull. It's something that I just, is there any other name that is like the opposite of yours? Because I know there are names that are called unisex. Is it a unisex name that we can also find some male, that particular name, perhaps, maybe if I could have the response to that, then perhaps I could have some more, questions to that. But, okay, so perhaps you want to respond. Okay, thanks. Okay, so to Margaret, yes, I hear you that South Africa is a very patriarchal society, but for me, I think it would be, wouldn't be doing any justice, I think, to the concept of patriarchy itself. What do I mean? I think we need to rethink what your assertion of South Africa is a patriarchal society. Why am I asking that? It's not only patriarchal. I think it's beyond, given the brutal nature of how women, girls, children, LGBTI communities are actually exposed to, the atrocities that we see today. Why am I saying this? We have, I think almost every country in this world is patriarchal, but there is some nuances, I think, that is attached to South Africa. And for me, I think, as feminist scholars, I think we need to rethink the concept of patriarchy and whether we should still just perhaps dismiss certain particular aspects or manifestations of what we call patriarchal tendencies just in the business as usual. That no, that's patriarchy. But go beyond the concept itself. Thank you very much.
Okay. Before you answer, can I have the two people also giving their questions? Then you can think about it, and then we go through the responses, okay? After that, I'll have to close because we're moving. So you could chat on the way down, and there's still this evening, if that's okay with you. So please try to be brief because they still have to answer. We've got 10 minutes left.
All right.
Okay? Okay, she's going because we're taping. Yeah, so she's going, then you're going, and then we come in here, they answer. 10 minutes, chop chop. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks. To the last speaker, I like this topic of translation and healing, and to it, you just got me thinking about an ongoing conversation that we've been having about how language is also broken by accents. I don't know about your experience in South Africa. You've probably been told you've got a great accent, it's sexy and all of that. But maybe in other countries you've had your issues. And in our case, the accent is always such a thing from the time that we grew up and started going to these white schools, and when we got back to the township, everybody would say, oh, Sensaka Schoa, oh, Sensaka Dineko, which means that she speaks English so well, and then you're immediately expected, it's immediately expected that whatever you have to say has to be totally intelligent, and anybody who doesn't Sensaka Dineko is just talking nonsense, so it causes all those conflicts. But now the accent is changing, especially in the political sphere, where if you don't inside Galingo, then you sound more powerful and closer to the people. Yeah, I'm sorry, I know that I'm just gonna cut it quickly, but yeah, the accent I think also needs its own healing process.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, the last speaker I'll speak to outside, because I'm very interested in both speaking and writing from a place of self, and also translating that into the academic sphere. But first, tuning into the inside voice and the inside stories, and being true to those, and as a form of healing, especially using not just language but poetry as a healing medium for me, and text, poetry healing, yeah. And the first speaker, just to cut it short, I loved listening to your work, but more than anything, I still do want to talk to you, but I'll talk to you outside. I'm taking you up on your word. So I listen when people speak. You said, if you ask, I'll just give, so I'm asking. And yeah, Kgaogelo, thank you for being yourself. and daring to live boldly outside the lines, outside the confines of culture. And I can imagine how traumatic family events can be. And I'm just saying, thank you for taking one for the team. I need to rub off your shoulder.
Thank you. You may answer. Yeah, it's open to you to answer. Yes? There's one we want. Just put it to you. Oh, you want to
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure what your name is.
Janet.
Janet, thank you. So I feel the same with the binaries that also exist within the animals as well. Sorry, I'm going to try and keep it short, but this is also a thing my parents say within the household is "Squasa senior." Like English is a very contradicting language within itself, right? But for example, we have Homu or Inkomo in Zulu. They are non-gendered. It's when we say cow, it's a female, right? But Homu can be either the male or the female, unless you, I don't know, anyone could disagree, but it isn't gendered. So for me, which is great, I react to people who come back and say Homu or Nkomo instead of cow. I feel that's great because Homu isn't specifically a female or a male. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Anybody else wants to do
Thank you for your comments, Janet. I just wanted to talk about the fact that I didn't specifically define patriarchy, and that was, oh, it's fine.
No, they're taking it, so you have
Okay, so patriarchy, we leave it open-ended because the way in which the program is structured is women tell their stories of their experiences of patriarchy. So they define what patriarchy is to them, right? So it has to be open-ended in our approach because each woman has their own personal description and experience of patriarchy. And the program emphasizes that we hear you, we see you. So your lived experience is how the program is structured. It's like a backwards way of looking at it. So there's no definition at the beginning, but at the end, through the stories, it is defined and articulated, right? So I hope that explains your... So it doesn't matter in the South African context. Well, it means that we are in South Africa, right? And these women that we are encountering are in South Africa, right? So they are the ones that actually do the defining because they are talking through their lived experiences.
So yeah, thank you for the questions. I'll be very short. So I also should mention there's a lot of research done on translanguaging, which is actually, I see you nodding, that's fantastic. So I think that is the way to go in terms of how do people use languages, how to language, right? Where I grew up, my family was going between Arabic, English, French, all the time, German. So it is not, and it's common, right? It's just that it is being frowned upon, so it's a social convention. So how, for me, it's really about how can you enact it, you know, like we have creatives here. How do you enact it through poetry, song, dance, performance, and share it and actually draw from that power? So this is like really, you know, something to do rather than, you know, to... That's why I wanted to ask, is the research actually a narrative? Is it a story in itself where it leads to something that can be done?
Sekai?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I don't think that was like a question.
No, you just
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything? Because everybody's spoken, so I'm just opening it for you to speak.
No, it was actually really interesting seeing what you were saying, that like you had already, like you were referencing some of the similar stuff. So I think it was nice as a collection of speaking together because there seemed to be kind of resonances between what we're saying. So I think it's always nice to situate it.
with colleagues there. Thank you.